Show and Keith Brown, the SNP's Deputy Leader. Hello to you, Mr Brown. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. He's got a tough day ahead of him, hasn't he?
I think so, and I think he's made it tougher for himself by some of the announcements he's made. For example, this fanciful £300 million to be shared between Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales turns out to be money that was already committed before. His appointment since being elected last week to put somebody else into Scottish Secretary's post over the heads, and despite the protestations of Scottish Tory MPs and MSPs, I think he started, and also one of his visits today is to the Trident Centre. Now, in Scotland, nuclear weapons are not at all popular. We do not like having the entire UK arsenal of nuclear weapons here in Scotland. So I'm not entirely sure why he's trying to think this will be a good idea. And any honeymoon he might have had didn't last very long.
Does he not get brownie points, Mr Brown, for, taking the bull by the horns, coming up to Scotland and saying, look, I'm here, I'm willing to listen?
I think that is true. I think Theresa May, to be fair, did the same thing after she was elected. But I think what's really important is that you do listen and you do act. Now, if you think that when Theresa May came up, we had not long had the Brexit vote. We had the Tories saying beforehand that they were, Ruth Davidson saying she was for Remain. Shortly afterwards saying she was determined that the First Minister had to keep Scotland in the single market and the customs union. Nicola Sturgeon said the same thing to Theresa May, but it wasn't listened to. We've been ignored for the last 3 years on the issue of Brexit. So what's really important is he starts to listen to people in Scotland, and in particular, listens to the First Minister when she says that 62% and rising of the people in Scotland want to stay in the EU, and every single polling district in Scotland, every local authority area voted to remain, and he should listen to those concerns, and that's what he'll be judged by.
Although, of course, he is the British Prime Minister, but Scotland has its own Conservative leader, and she is very popular. She did very well, along with lots of other Tories, at the last general election, at the cost of the SNP. So, there are many Conservatives in your part of the world will be looking to her for guidance and leadership, I'm guessing.
Well, it's worth bearing in mind that the last election that you referred to, the SNP got 35 of the 59 seats, which is a huge number, a vast majority of seats in Scotland. And also the last election we had in Scotland was the European elections, and I think the Tories got around 9 to 10% and the SNP around 38, 39%. So I think we can overstate her popularity, but what does seem to be the case is that the early contact that she's had with the new Prime Minister to say, don't sack her friend, David Mundell, has been ignored. And she's now issued essentially an ultimatum to him to say that she will not countenance no deal. Now, my suspicion is that, as with so many other things, Ruth Davidson will simply roll over and accept what she's told. But on the face of it, it does provide a problem for Boris Johnson if his Scottish leader, who has no real control over the MPs, is saying something completely different to what seems to be his preferred option now of no deal.
How many seats did you get at the last election, did you say, sorry?
35 out of 59.
OK. How many did you have the 2015 election?
We had 56.
Yeah. So where did those seats go? They went to the Tories, didn't they?
No, there was different parties. The Lib Dems picked up some seats, as did Labour, but we were still by far and away the largest party. I think the Conservatives got 13 seats. The SNP got 35 seats. Now, other parties could only dream of that kind of continued success over the last 12 years. The SNP currently polling over 40% in the opinion polls after 12 years in government. That's a remarkable, absolutely remarkable position to be in. And I would have hoped that some of the UK media outlets would have picked that up and given that some more attention, rather than some of the Tory tropes. For example, it was a defeat for the SNP last time. Well, 35 out of 59 seats is not a defeat by anybody else's estimation.
Does that translate into a second referendum?
Well, I think a second referendum on independence is coming, and I think it will be followed by independence. We have seen, for example, a couple of polls recently which have shown, when given the option of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister or independence, 53% of people in Scotland choose independence. When given the choice between no-deal Brexit and independence, 52% of people support independence. And I have to say that, and I know that politicians say this all the time, but listen to people talk to me, and some of the people are very surprising. People that have been absolutely cast iron no voters against independence before, now saying they would support it because so appalled are they by not just Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, but the cabinet that he surrounded himself with. So I think independence is coming, and of course we will have a referendum.
It was a once, your party said it was a once in a generation referendum, didn't you?
No, I think Alex Sam was asked about how long it would be for a further referendum, and he thought this was a once-in-a-generation opportunity. That wasn't on the ballot paper. It wasn't a decision taken by anybody. It wasn't something I've ever said. And there's no way that you can stop people from taking the principle of self-determination and taking their future into their own hands. It's a universally acknowledged principle at the UN, self-determination.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.